Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Rowdy Reads. Last time, we read through the Worlds of Power adaptation novelization of the original NES 8-bit Metal Gear, which was one of multiple books that the Worlds of Power series under the pen name of FX9 wrote, adapting numerous 8-bit video games that were made for the NES Entertainment System. Although, to the best of my knowledge, none of those games were official Nintendo-published games anyway. They were always third-party editions. So, we might as well move on to another such edition. And this one is special because it is actually the first of the Worlds of Power series that I ever officially read. And, for what it's worth, this is one story that at least was adapted from a video game that actually had a story involved in it. Because yes, indeed, I am talking about the novelization of Ninja Gaiden. Let's just get started, shall we? The blindfold was tight. Very tight. In the back, it pulled on Ryu Hayabusa's hair. He waited for his attacker. His steel gray eyes were wide open, meeting nothing but solid blackness. But Ryu Hayabusa saw everything. Not with his eyes. They were only one sense, one of 6. And if you only trusted one sense, you were dead. Ryu heard a flutter above him. Instantly, he knew what it was. A red-winged blackbird, leaving a Japanese red maple tree, flying south-southwest. His ears told him that. The smell of the bark, the slight shifting of the breeze against his skin. No ordinary person could put all this information together without seeing. To a ninja, it was a way of life. He took 3 steps and stopped. His opponent was coming. Ryu's body loosened, relaxed. That was the ninja way. Let the other attack first. Use his energy against him. Footsteps. From the left. Height, about 6'1", 5 inches taller than Ryu. The punch. From the right. About chest high. Whoosh! Ryu stepped aside. His Yoko Aruki step was perfect. The punch sailed past. Then another followed. Instantly, Ryu's right hand shot out. He made contact, hitting the outside of his attacker's arm. "Yah!" came the cry of pain. Ryu raised his leg and planted the sole of his tabi boot squarely on his rival's hip. 1 down. He whirled around. There was another one coming. A sword? Ryu sensed it, but could it possibly be true? Fear bolted through him. For a split second. The swordsman planted his feet. He thrust quickly, but Ryu leapt to the side. Ryu landed and punched his opponent's sword hand. In one fluid motion he leaned in, grabbed both of the other man's hands, and twisted the arms upward. Stepping behind the swordsman's leg, Ryu threw him to the ground. "Oof!" the man cried out, landing with a heavy thud. Ryu stood upright again. He balanced his weight, let his arms go slack. He was prepared for his next challenge. Instead, he heard voices. Mumbling voices. He knew who the voices belonged to, and he knew they were not going to attack him. Ryu was safe. But he was scared. For the first time in all of his 13 years, he felt fear racing through him. Ryu, who could laugh in the face of a knife-wielding marauder. Ryu, who wouldn't flinch if a samurai were to suddenly rise from the dead and charge at him. These voices were making Ryu shake in his shoes. And when one of them boomed loudly, he couldn't keep himself from jumping. "You may remove your blindfold, Ryu Hayabusa," the voice said. Ryu did as he was told. A few yards away, 3 black belt ninja instructors stood near a ginkgo tree. The one in the middle, Akira, had been his mentor since birth. Now Akira was staring at him. Ryu tried to swallow, but his throat was too dry. He felt as if a flock of Japanese butterflies had just broken out of cocoons in his stomach. With a weak smile, he asked, "Did I do it?" Akira walked over to him, slowly. His face was grim and concentrated, and he averted Ryu's eyes. Panic gripped Ryu. What had gone wrong? Akira stepped 2 feet before his prize pupil. He grabbed Ryu's shoulder firmly. And before he spoke, his eyes betrayed a glimmer of what? Fury? Mockery? Mischief? Happiness? Ryu couldn't tell. "Ryu," Akira said softly, "congratulations. You have achieved your Dan grade. From this day on, you are the highest class of ninja warrior, and the best I have ever seen in my life." Ryu tried to keep calm. He wanted to thank Akira humbly. He wanted to say that it was Akira, not he, who deserved the praise. But when he opened his mouth, only one word came out. Yahoo! Chapter 2. "Ryu, darling, I'm so happy for you." Mrs. Hayabusa's dark eyes glowed with warmth. She returned her son's enthusiastic hug and realized once again that she had to stand on tiptoe. Her boy had grown so much. Ryu tore himself away. "I don't believe it." "No, I do believe it. I don't know what I believe. Oh, this is incredible!" He let out a whoop of joy and leapt into the air. Mrs. Hayabusa laughed. "I've never seen you like this, my son. I've never felt like this!" For the first time since coming home, he set down the small box he had been carrying. Opening it delicately, he pulled out the only item of clothing he had ever cared about. His black belt. He tried it on and felt power surging through him. "How does it look, Mom?" Mrs. Hayabusa looked deeply into her son's eyes. "Beautiful, Ryu," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just beautiful." Ryu nodded. His joy had overwhelmed him. He had hardly been able to see straight. But his mother's eyes brought him back to earth. There was sadness behind them, and Ryu knew why. "It's time, I guess, huh?" he said. Ryu could tell his mother was trying not to look upset. She held her head high and smiled. "My dearest son," she said, "I know your fate was determined for you many, many years ago. You began your training when you were still in diapers. I have watched you, seen your progress, shared your joy. And I know that all of it was in preparation for this day. But somehow..." Her voice broke. Ryu rushed to her side and put his arm around her. She let him stay there for a moment, taking his comfort silently. Then she gently took his arm away and walked across the living room. The delicate straw tatami mat rustled under her footsteps. She stopped at the oaken chest and choked back a sob. Pulling open the top drawer, she took out a sealed envelope. Holding it in her trembling fingers, she turned to face her son. "When your father left Tokyo for America, he was a young man," she began. "He was so proud of his newborn baby boy, Ryu. He couldn't wait to come home from his expedition. And neither could I. I remember his parting words exactly. 'I give you this, my dear Asami, with a reluctant heart. I know I will be seeing you within 2 weeks. But in the unlikely event that I should not return, save this letter, this Gaiden, until little Ryu has become a man. On that day, you must give it to him, and wish him success with all your heart." Ryu nodded. He had heard the story as a little boy, and never forgotten it. "I was startled," Mrs. Hayabusa continued, "but your father comforted me. He assured me that I would come home, that he would come home, and I believed him." She lowered her eyes. "Never did I think I would have to give this to you, Ryu." A tear rolled down her cheek as she handed her son the envelope. Ryu took it. He felt icy cold, numb. He was torn between the urge to comfort his mother and the call of destiny that had driven him every day of his life. The envelope was yellowed with age. He shuddered when he saw the words written on it, "For Ryu, upon his passage to manhood." His father's faded handwriting was an eerie reminder of the man he had never met, the man whose disappearance he still did not understand.